We begin today with breaking news.
Traffic is backed up. There's an accident on the freeway.
About a dozen downtown businesses were boarded up Wednesday.
And in business, the stock market fell through the floor
Two
today.
nights of protests over the police shooting of an unarmed black
This is
man.
a regular affair for the president who has
Have you
spent
been
many
wondering how
hours.
safe is the beef here at home?
Hello there. Welcome to Mad World, the show that, with all the craziness, wackiness, looniness going on in this mad world we find ourselves living in, your hosts, Los and Bertram,
It's a couple crazies
try and make
out
sense
there.
of all of it. Yeah, we try and make sense of all of it and figure out where we go from here. And like I said, I'm one of your hosts, Los Stevens, and as always, I'm joined by...
Where's the big song and dance about all your names, Los?
I don't really feel like it right now, but
Man,
yes,
I get that.
I'm Los, your friendly neighborhood Los, and yes, welcome to another episode. Long time no listen. We were on a hiatus of some sorts.
Even though we kept recording episodes, Los.
That's right.
We didn't get a week off.
There were some lost tapes in there, but we'll loop it back around
Yes.
to get those topics in front of you. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah. But today's episode is about something that happened this past week. And I don't know, maybe you clicked play on this, so you already know. But there was a school shooting in Texas, Uvalde, Texas, where the shooter ran into an elementary school and shot multiple kids, multiple people, and killed, as of this recording date, 21. 19 kids, 2 adults. And not just the town of Uvalde, but the whole entire country, United States, and even the world at large.
I was hoping you were going to tell me what country this was in, because I was going to guess it was Zaire.
Nope. Which
Wasn't it?
doesn't exist anymore.
I know.
but-
Chile?
Nope.
Greece?
Close. No.
Australia?
No.
Oh, wait. It happened in the country that it always happens in the world. I'd like to see the percentages, Los. It's got to be like 96% of them, right? Like
I mean,
90. I'm not, don't hate on me, but I got to see the number on that. What percentage of world mass shootings are in America? It happened in the United States, buddy. Real sad.
It's as American as tornadoes, which happen to be a thing that happens most frequently in the United States. We shouldn't say apple pie. Tornadoes are by far happen the most in the United States. But yeah, another mass shooting, which we happen to be getting used to since we last joined everyone. There was a mass shooting in Buffalo that killed multiple people, which we didn't even get to cover on this show, as well as a string of some others there. But this one, yeah, this really struck a chord, and not that we should be numb to all of it, but it happens with such high frequency that we tend to be a little numb about it. But little kids, man, little kids. Bertram is a teacher who teaches kids this age, and you can understand the youthfulness, the innocence of kids that age.
Los, I looked up, it doesn't say what percentage of mass shootings, but have you heard how many there have been so far in America?
No.
I put a link in the show notes from NPR, and it says it's 21 weeks into the year, and America has already seen 213 mass shootings.
Mass shootings, which in previous episodes we've defined as shootings of 4 or 5 or more people, something like that.
I'm looking it up on here, but it doesn't say what technically a mass shooting is.
Yeah, I think, go listen to our previous episodes on
Gun violence,
as well as a recent one we did on the recent crime wave hitting the United
two of our
States.
best episodes.
But and since we did that one so recently. This isn't really discussing the wave, which was violent crimes in a sense of not just mass shootings, but there were robberies, burglaries, theft in there. But this one is just mostly focusing on the incident here in Uvalde, and it's not as sort of structured as some of our other episodes, but I think this was a good opportunity to really go over the facts and wrestle with the question of, is this now the time to change anything in terms of guns and or addressing gun violence and with solutions outside of gun control? Mental health is always a key component of that, and we'll get into that as it relates to the shooter of this incident.
Mm-hmm.
But Bertram.
I also wanted to throw in, I think do you remember this? And I think that's what you alluded to right there, the Gun Violence Archive.
The Gun Violence Archive.
I think we put a link to the Gun Violence Archive in our gun episode, which, again, that was one of our best episodes. It totally changed the way I think about guns. So go check it out. But it has an up-to-date, by the numbers list of all the gun deaths that are happening. There's one that just talks about, like, the last 72 hours. There's a map for mass shootings in 2022. So go check that one out if you want more information about, like, mass shootings and just look at some of the statistics. But going back to the NPR article, it says, today is day 145 of the year, and the country has already experienced 213 mass shootings so far. 213 such attacks in 21 weeks. This averages out to about 10 a week. That's ridiculous.
Wow.
I'm looking at a list from the Gun Violence Archive, all the mass shootings in 2022. There was another one. What happened in Philadelphia?
Philadelphia.
So that one, and you said 4 injured? Was that what you said a mass shooting is?
I think it's 4 or 5, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's 4 because this one has no one was killed and 4 people were injured. So it puts on there where then Uvalde is second on the list now with 17 injured, 22 killed. The last Buffalo was the last one before that where it was 10 killed. I mean, there was every other one is 1 or 2 people killed. So my goodness, those are definitely the 2 worst ones. And then Milwaukee had 17 injured, none killed. That was May 13th, 2022.
You could find, and so there was also a report that came out within the last day. Once again, we're recording this episode on Thursday, March 26th, where guns have become the leading cause of death for American kids, according to the CDC. For the first time, firearms were the leading cause of death for kids 1 and older. That went back to 2020, in which that occurred, where they've compiled the data and done it. So by the numbers, nearly 2/3 of 4,368 U.S. children up to the age of 19 who were killed by guns were homicide victims. Once again, per the CDC, which those outside of the U.S., that's the Center for Disease Control. Motor vehicle crashes, formerly the leading cause of death for kids 1 and older, killed nearly 4,000. So there was a sizable gap by a few hundred there. It also goes on that another 30% of firearm-related child fatalities were suicides, 3% were accidental, and 2% were of undetermined intent. Male youths were significantly more likely to be killed by guns, while vehicle crashes claimed more females. There were stark racial disparities. The firearm death rate for black children was more than 14 times that of white children, and white children were still more likely to be killed by motor vehicles than guns. And then DC had the highest firearm death rate, followed by Louisiana, Alaska, and Mississippi.
Did you want to go over a timeline of what happened during this? I have a timeline from Reuters. Do you want to detail what happened with Uvalde?
Well, why don't you share the overview of what happened, and then we can go over some of the details of the timeline, as it fits there.
And it's been tough too, because you got to stay away from social media, I find, because like Imgur and Reddit, and as much as I love the left, man, when they get angry about something, they start making all sorts of accusations, and the right does it too, obviously. But I really wanted to attack this with a fair, open, patient mind, and man, this is the most patient I've been thinking about this in some time, because that's the only way we're going to fix this, right? And so, I wanted to just pull up something like Reuters, our good friends, and just come up with some of the facts. So there's more interesting things that I would like to ask questions about that happened, but this is just sort of a bare bones timeline. It was Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Authorities said Salvador Ramos, 18 years old, shot and killed 19 children plus 2 teachers after shooting his grandmother at the house they shared. This is the timeline. May 17th, Ramos legally buys a semi-automatic rifle on his 18th birthday at a sporting goods store in Uvalde. May 18th, Ramos buys 375 rounds of ammunition from an unknown vendor. Well, that's going to have to come out. May 19th, Ramos buys a second rifle at the same sporting goods store. May 24th, now this is 5 days later, sometime between 11 and 11:15 in the morning, Ramos sends a series of 3 private social media messages. I'm going to shoot my grandmother. I shot my grandmother. His grandmother survives the attack with a gunshot wound to the face. Jesus. And I'm going to shoot a school. At 11:28, Ramos wrecks his truck near the school after fleeing from the house where he shot his grandmother. He jumps out of the passenger side with a rifle and a bag. He sees 2 witnesses at a funeral home across the street and fires at them. He walks toward Robb Elementary School, climbs a fence into the parking lot, and starts shooting at the school. 12 minutes later, at 11:40, the shooter walks into the west side of the school, apparently through an unlocked door, and fires multiple rounds. Los, I've heard a lot of conflicting reports on that one too, where there was some, and maybe I'll add this part, and then I want to hear what you heard and if you have any facts. 11:44 a.m., officers from multiple law enforcement agencies begin to converge on the school. The gunman shoots at the first officer responding to the scene. The officers move back and take cover, then approach the suspect again. Los, did you hear anything about the door and how he got in?
Yeah, did I hear anything about the door?
Well, because I guess and I try to stay off social media, but there was a lot of people that were very upset about how this guy was just able, Ramos, the 18-year-old, how this kid, I guess, was able to just sort of get into the building so easily with police officers there, and the doors are supposed to be locked, and how he was able to just kind of get in so easily.
Yeah, there's I've heard sort of incomplete information around that, if I could put it that way. Because what I understand was there was a single entrance, if I'm not mistaken, and he was able to get into that entrance basically unbothered, unobstructed. And from there, and that's where it gets a little blurry or dicey about what was done, what the police were able to do or weren't able to do as he entered in and then went into a classroom. And then I'm sure, as you have with the timeline there, it was over, an hour in which he was there before police made their way into.
11:44 was when he got into the shootout with the law officers. They moved back, and then 12:40 is when the other team arrives and kills Ramos. Around this time, the shooter enters a classroom and massacres the students and teachers inside. Officers report hearing at least 25 gunshots from the classroom soon after arriving at the scene, from 11:40 to about 12:40. So yeah, that's an hour. Officers on the scene call for more help, requesting tactical teams, specialty equipment, body armor, precision snipers, and hostage negotiators. At about 12:40, U.S. Border Patrol tactics team arrive, enter the classroom, kill the suspect. And there's been a lot of controversy about, like, why did they wait an hour we're going to wait for our stuff to arrive before you engage the shooter. And from everything I know about school shootings, that really did not seem to make sense. And I know the officers have been in a lot of controversy lately. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I just found that odd, and just trying to be as objective, neutral as possible. Yeah, I'm wondering, and maybe you could provide more insight on this in terms of protocol for active shooter. The procedure there. If this was something following in that playbook, or was it because, like we hear, there was limited entryways and sort of being tactical there? But yeah, what I start to question is, once you hear gunshots, knowing there are staff and most of all children in the school, in these classrooms, what would keep you from taking action there? And as we record this, we don't have much information as to what the police department has been able to provide that would make sense. But I'm asking that question like I'm sure so many others are.
And my understanding, because I've had to do active shooter training, I've been teaching for 8 years, and so I've done countless active shooter trainings, and everything I seem to know about it is that you if you have a gun, if you are one of the people who have a gun, you go after that shooter. Like, you have to take down the shooter. It gets dicey when you're a teacher and you have kids that you are in charge of, because if you're asking, like, should I be going after the shooter, and like, well, it really depends. Like, I kind of have to stay with my kids and make sure that I am safe with them. But on the other hand, it really depends on the situation. But if you have a gun, you're supposed to go in there and go get them and not wait to secure the perimeter. So I do want to hear in the coming weeks, somebody going to get in trouble. Somebody's going to lose their job, Los. I do have an AP News article that sort of talks about it, about frustrated onlookers. And it says, Javier Cesares, whose fourth grade daughter Jacqueline Cesares was killed in the attack, said he raced to the school when he heard about the shooting, arriving while police were still gathered outside the building. Upset that police were not moving in, he raised the idea of charging into the school with several other bystanders. Let's just rush in because the cops aren't doing anything like they're supposed to, he said. More could have been done. They were unprepared, he added. Minutes earlier, Saranza had watched as Salvador Ramos crashed his truck into a ditch outside the school, grabbed his AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle, and shot at 2 people outside a nearby funeral home who ran away uninjured. Officers say he encountered, and encountered is in quotes, a school district security officer outside the school, though there were conflicting reports from authorities on whether the men exchanged gunfire. After running inside, he fired on 2 arriving Uvalde police officers who were outside the building, said Texas Department of Public Safety spokesman Travis Considine. The police officers were injured. After entering the school, Ramos charged into one classroom. And, obviously I don't have to keep reading it, but it's a weird problem because you have so much training that you're supposed to know what to do in this situation, and it just kind of sounds like some people, maybe they got overwhelmed, which is why you have all the trainings, right? Is that, these poor kids constantly have to do active shooter trainings, just like we do it just as often as we do tornado and fire drills. It's like every month, hey man, we got to have a fire drill, we got to have some sort of tornado drill, we got to have an active shooter drill, we have to have internal lockdowns and external lockdowns, and these are the things that we train for. And you're asking all these kids to train to do those things. I don't think it's out of line to say the police should also be really well trained in how to deal with those things. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's very head scratching and frustrating and tragic, because even before entering the school, these are facts, right? This isn't just my opinion. This guy was an active shooter because he shot at those individuals outside that funeral home,
and people
he shot
saw
his
him.
grandmother. Yes, so he was an active shooter. There should have been some deterrence in getting him to enter the school in the first place. And
That's a very good point.
And then that happens, and then you wait more than an hour to move in. So much could happen in an hour. In fact, we learned that within minutes he had shot and killed, all of the victims. So there wasn't much wiggle room to be extra tactical or strategic, if that's what you were being. If we're giving you the benefit of the doubt and assuming you weren't just negligent. It's really sad. Really sad.
Los, I also have an article that I put in here about sort of the extensive safety plan of Uvalde, Texas schools. It says they do everything they can to protect students from a mass school shooting. Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District had doubled its security budget in recent years, according to public documents. Oh, my goodness. In part to comply with a state legislation passed in the wake of a 2018 school shooting in which 8 students and 2 teachers were killed. I didn't know that, Los. Did you know there was a 2018 shooting in Uvalde, too?
Yes, yeah.
The district adopted an array of security measures that included its own police force, threat assessment teams at each school, a threat reporting system, social media monitoring software, fences around schools, and a requirement that teachers lock their classroom doors, according to the security plan posted on the district's website. It happened anyway. My goodness. And I wonder, 2018, you know when that was? Before COVID.
Yeah.
And COVID, I know a lot of schools that have been rocked by budgets, especially because COVID cut a lot of our state budget out. I think we lost like half of our budget. But also because, during COVID, the states weren't making a whole lot of money coming in. And, geez, what is the big expenditure of state governments? Education, right? And so when COVID happened, a lot of schools had to eat a lot of the losses. So I wonder if that was 2018, you put all these security plans in, then 2020 comes along and COVID happens. You're like, well, let's cut all these right now, even though we don't want to, and hope it doesn't happen. And then it happened again.
Yeah, and so this what gets into the debate around what these proposed solutions of sort of pro-gun people are, and that getting more guns into capable hands to prevent things like this from happening, right? A good guy with a gun is what you always hear. Who beats? How does the saying go? Who beats a bad guy with a gun?
A good guy with a gun. Yeah, that they get in a lot of trouble for saying that.
So there's that trope now, that still gets uttered in different ways now. You won't hear these pro-gun people say it outright, but based on what these solutions are, which I don't know if we could call them solutions at this point, but yeah, it's still that same sort of narrative, right? That it's not the guns that are the problem, it's that the individuals or the conditions or these facilities are ill-equipped or faculties ill-equipped. But as you just reiterated, right, they had, after that shooting in 2018, Texas had passed legislation in 2019 to, as the Texas Tribune describes it, quote unquote, harden schools from external threats after that deadly shooting back in 2018, and yet it repeats itself. So what do we do now?
Well, in fairness, one of the hard things is you're like, well, people don't blame guns. It's not the gun's fault. In fairness, it's not the gun's fault. We did that excellent gun episode and talked about guns are not, I think our ultimate takeaway from that episode, I have to go back and listen to it, is guns are not the problem. We have to go back and identify the root cause. And the root cause is not guns are just bad. We definitely do have an unhealthy relationship with guns in this country. Sort of like our relationship with coffee, right? It's like, man, start drinking a bunch of coffee so you stick it to all the Brits in their tea and things. And it's like, man, we have an unhealthy obsession with coffee and caffeine and stuff like that too. But and maybe those two are linked too, right? Is because ultimately the problem is not that it's the guns; it's we are clearly dealing with some sort of traumatic, not even just post-COVID, but some sort of a mental health crisis, right?
Yeah, and off air, right? And we'll often hear COVID being used as maybe a reasoning or diagnosis behind some of the angst that exists right now. But off air, I believe it was a couple weeks ago after some incident, I would tell Bertram, I'd say, people wanted so much to get back to normal.
Here it
pre-COVID.
is.
Here it is. This was life before COVID.
Yeah.
It wasn't as rosy as we thought it was. I knew it, but it's just one of those things you I'm not saying in this incident, but people have to find out for themselves. They have to be reminded of the problems that did exist that predated COVID, that wasn't related to COVID-related trauma. And this is not me minimizing that in any way, but it's just this is who we are. This is how we've been. Columbine was 23 years ago, right? And yet we're still seeing this. Newtown, which was the last mass shooting of such a degree in an elementary school, was 10 years ago. And yet this is still happening. And so, what do we do is the question that I think most are asking, even to the credit of pro-gun people, but it's still a question mark, right? It's still not saturated with any real actions or ideas, so if you're Bertram, if you're a pro-gun person, right, what do we do about this?
If I'm a pro-gun person?
Yeah, if you're a pro-gun person,
well, if you're
I'll
a pro-gun
pitch it to the other side too. But
if you're a pro-gun person right now, you're not doing anything and you're keeping your mouth shut because this is the time where every pro-gun person I know, all these NRA people are saying like, well, now's not the time to get angry. It's like, well, that's what I'd be saying if it was your ass too. If you're pro-gun, okay, let's say I'm pro-gun. I mean, I guess I kind of am, but what is the solution? Well, the solution is to go back and find the culprit that is not guns. If it's not guns, what is it? And I think it was Abbott. Didn't Governor Abbott say we are in a mental health crisis?
He did say that.
The only problem was it was caused by him because that's the dude who cut funding for all the mental health support. And man, remember Grover Cleveland? When Grover Cleveland and well, you probably don't remember Grover Cleveland, but I'm so old that I remember him. What was that, 1880s? And he was saying like, the government shouldn't ever legislate social policy. And then you had 100 years later, 1980, with Ronald Reagan, where he was like, man, the problem. He said the solution isn't government. The government is the problem, right? And so he starts cutting all these social the welfare and all these things and all these social systems. And it's like the Republican playbook, they loved, and I'm going to do this without getting angry or anything like that, but it's part of their playbook that they don't care or invest in social health services. And if it were me, if you'd like to keep your guns, we're going to need social health services because I do believe that guns are not the problem. Granted, guns need to be tighter regulated, so we can do something about it with guns, but I don't want to take away the safe gun owners because okay, let's do it. So on the left, we have the abortion issue right now going on. You and I were going to do a Roe v. Wade argument over here. And on the right, we have this gun issue. And they both have the same solution, right? Is that the majority of people getting abortions and the majority of gun owners are both safe, responsible people that are doing the right thing. So those people should not be being legislated against and doing mass sweeping legislations and outright banning abortion and outright taking guns away. It's the exact same problem with the exact same solution. And it's okay, how do you fix the 1% of people that are having unsafe or I guess you say the word like wrong abortions, or the 1% of people that are bad gun owners? And it's probably less than 1% on both sides. And so it's like, how do we fix those issues? And it's like, well, you have softer regulations on both, right? And you be compassionate. And you start with empathy, which is, by the way, step one of the design thinking process. I don't know if you know that much about design thinking, but step one
as a designer, yes.
Oh, of course. Step one is empathize, right? And I forgot about that. Yeah, you're a big time designer. There's an op-ed piece in the LA Times that talks about why our response to school shootings is all wrong, and it has a list of some of the things we can do with guns. There is strong evidence that these specific measures could reduce horrific effects of gun violence. One, bans on assault weapons, which they don't want that, right? The gun owners do not want bans on assault weapons or large capacity magazines. Hey man, just give me a reason for why you need those, okay?
A well-regulated militia.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
I'll get to that in just a bit, but go ahead.
Permit to purchase laws are known to reduce mass shooting violence. Research shows that in states where gun purchasers are required to be licensed and fingerprinted before obtaining a firearm, mass shootings occur at much lower rate compared to states with such policies. How about extreme risk protection orders, also known as red flag laws? They allow authorities or family members to petition a court if a loved one is believed to pose a threat to themselves or others, and to request that a person in question be temporarily disposed of their firearms. You know what I like about a lot of this stuff too, Los, is that why was this kid able to just go in and immediately purchase a gun? Dr. Lori Desautel always talks about the brain, right? I have her books, and she's very smart. She talks about when we are emotional as animals, when we are emotional animals, we are stupid. So why would I let someone emotional, as clearly this kid probably was, where he was upset or he was thinking about things that he shouldn't have been thinking about? He didn't ponder this. He didn't have, strong critical thinking and reasoning skills. He got to go in and immediately buy a gun and kill his grandmother. And that happens a lot. You should not be able to buy a firearm from a sporting goods store and just walk out with it. That's a bad idea. And I don't get why gun owners have a problem with that, because they just get upset, and that's the right thing to do, right? The article continues. Restrictions on the kind of firearms those younger than 21 can purchase also offer promise. The alleged Robb Elementary gunman reportedly bought his assault rifles just a few days prior to the shooting, right after he turned 18. Approximately 20% of active shootings at K through 12 schools are committed by people between 18 and 20. By limiting this age group to ownership of long guns traditionally used for hunting, mass shootings could also be significantly reduced. And finally, as approximately 3 out of 4 school shooters who are under 18 obtain their firearms from home, safe storage and child access prevention laws, which require that firearms be unloaded and locked when attended in the home, can be beneficial in preventing school shootings. So those are some easy fixes that we can start to make. No one's coming to take your guns away. We just want to make sure that they are regulated. Man, doesn't that Second Amendment say well-regulated militia? Well, these would be well regulations. Thank you.
Happens to say so, yes.
I'm pro Second Amendment.
For those,
I want a well-regulated militia too.
Yeah, for those curious, right, including pro Second Amendment people, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It always seems as if and I don't know if it's a reading comprehension thing, but the first part of that Second Amendment, a well-read militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people. They only see the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
They don't know what infringed means either. Come on, man.
Which until what was this, 2008, with the case District of Columbia v. Heller, this this was a sort of open debate, right? This was something that was discussed widely on to which depths are there regulations or restrictions on guns. And it wasn't until that case that the Supreme Court decided that this relates to individuals having arms, having guns. And so, there's just that consensus, right? And so, now there's also, as cases continue to go through the Supreme Court, there's debates as to additional restrictions that could be lifted outside of legislation, but by the Supreme Court that could lift some of these other things, such as carrying concealed weapons, assault rifles, and things like that, which could be, according to the Supreme Court, based on how they rule, constitutional. So there's that, but then there's also, the policy side. It's like, wow, we await what the courts say. What are the states doing? And as Bertram so eloquently
don't
put
say
it,
eloquently.
I just did, too late.
As Bertram rambled.
As he put it, though, controls of some kind, right? When you're driving a car, right? Without any sort of knowledge of how to operate said vehicle, it's a deadly weapon. It's a machine.
One of the deadliest.
Yeah, it kills more people than almost anything. And that we have a pretty sophisticated way of, and those drivers out there, including you listening to this episode right now, if you're in the car, you'll be like, well, I don't know about sophisticated, Los. If you see some of these idiots out here, you wouldn't say that it's an ironclad way. And I wouldn't say it is, but at least there's a system, right? For most people who shouldn't be driving, right? There's ways and testing and things like that, and licenses that, if you're not, including us with bad eyes, right, Bertram, I need corrective lenses. If I walk into the DMV and say, hey, trying to get my license, and they test me, I'm not going to be able to drive a vehicle without my glasses, without some verification that I could see. And yet with guns, which you could argue is just an instrument, just like a spoon or a cone is an instrument to enjoy ice cream.
Isn't it fascinating that we just want them to be reasonable and responsible, and they scream and scream about their rights to own guns? Meanwhile, these are the same people that vehemently had slaves and refused to give them up. Don't you find that a little alarming, that it's like, man, you were treating other people like that, and maybe now you're just scared of being treated like that, so they just, ooh, man, they do not like having their rights infringed upon, but they sure do love infringing on other people's rights.
And,
Go ask John Punch.
Well, and that's going back to the Second Amendment. That is what's so puzzling about the textualists. The textualists are the people who go, they claim to go based on how the Constitution was written at the time it was written. So those justices who we perceive or call conservative, right? Right now you have your Samuel Alito, who wrote that leaked opinion of Roe v. Wade, or Clarence Thomas, Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and
the Party Meister,
Neil Gorsuch. These are especially some of those, Neil Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas, and those. They look at the Constitution, how the framers wrote it, and if we were to contextualize this, right? Let's go back to 1787, a well-regulated militia. Let's start there, right? That was when the Army of the United States wasn't very, speaking of sophisticated, wasn't very robust. If you know the American Revolution, a lot of the soldiers were regular, everyday Joes who needed to go out there and fight for what wasn't a country at the time. This was a territory that was trying to make its independence against the grandest army of the day, against the British. And so, yeah, they needed to be able to bear arms. And when the Bill of Rights was written, which the Second Amendment is included in that the possibility that such a battle, a war could happen again in the same fashion in which it did and with the American Revolution was a reality. And so you needed to be able to spell out those rights, and that from there came the Second Amendment. And so that's, if we're contextualizing it, that's what we should be able to say, because we also follow with the Third Amendment, which goes along with the Second Amendment. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. How many times, Bertram, do you hear anyone quoting the Third Amendment?
Never, but now I want some hardcore Third Amendmenters out there. Hey, you trying to make me quarter militia?
So, well, yeah, and it's like, if you're part of a militia, right, in which, hey, people who are bearing arms, couldn't someone who wants someone out of their house be protesting that their Third Amendment right is being infringed upon because they're being quartered there in a time of peace? I don't know.
My goodness.
That would be an interesting case. Someone sues because they're trying to kick maybe it's a spouse or a roommate out.
I'm not going to look up to see if that's happened, Loves.
And they're like, well, they have a gun, so they're a soldier and they're being quartered and I want them out.
That's interesting.
It's time of peace. But anyway. But okay, so what about, you laid out also an argument of the gun control people would. But did you know, by the time this is released out into the masses, the NRA will have held their conference in nearby Houston, Texas?
Oh, I did hear about that, yeah. And everybody's going.
Everyone's going. And so by the time everyone's listening to this, you would have heard what the response is. I believe Governor Abbott is attending. Maybe Bertram's favorite president of all time. I don't know. Is he going to be there?
My favorite president? Barack Obama?
Nope. Next one.
No, not the Donald. The Donald doesn't like guns. That dude's never fired a gun before.
Oh, he's never fired a gun before, I swear.
He spends too much time eating Big Macs.
I was typing in NRA conference and I accidentally typed in Confederates. A Freudian slip of the fingers.
Very fitting.
But yeah, enough laughs though. I mean, yeah, going back to what we're dealing with here. I'm just gonna pose this question, Bertram. What do you think is it gonna take for something dramatic to happen? Meaning, from a policy standpoint, whether that be gun control or some sort of mental health sort of revamping of our current system.
Well, that's what it is too, is we got to all be a lot smarter about what causes a lot of mental health problems. We got to have more awareness. We got to do more studies on the brain. We got to understand how to help these people, because in any of these shootings, have you seen, oh man, this person was wrapped really tight. Like this was a smart, intelligent, savvy person. Don't they say about that like Ted Bundy? Whereas like Ted Bundy was like a charismatic, like attractive guy, right? And that's what's weird about like serial killers. And these people don't come off like, sadists and sociopaths. There's like, well, there's something definitely wrong here, and there's some sort of like links to depression and all these. It's like, man, there's still so much we got to learn about the brain. And unfortunately, I put a link in the show notes to Beto O'Rourke. where he went off on Governor Abbott, and I kind of really liked it. And my favorite part was he said, Texas has 50th in the nation in mental health care access, and is because of Governor Abbott. And so I put the link to that in the show notes from PolitiFact, because it kind of breaks down what he said, and it breaks down some of the numbers about a 2022 report on mental health in the United States by the nonprofit Mental Health America puts Texas last among states and D.C. for access to mental health care. And that's the problem, right? Is that these people are not getting help. So if we want to fix these things, like where are these kids coming from? Well, this kid was 18 years old. He's coming from, American education system, which I have seen firsthand. It is severely lacking in the terms of support. I had an Uber driver the other day that was a social worker, and we talked a lot about it. It's like, we need more social workers. We need more guidance counselors. We need more people who can, like, I do this crisis prevention training where I have a training, and it's every 2 years, and I am able to see when kids are starting to get triggered and what sort of symptoms that each individual kid shows before they have like a meltdown, right? And so part of it is just running interventions before those things happen. It's like, this kid was living with grandma, right? Or he shot his grandma. Clearly there's problems at home. Okay, and by the way, that's where it starts. Do you know what is the biggest indicator of a successful student, Los? What do you think it is? Of all the things, what makes a successful student?
Yeah, I would say home life, parents.
100% of the time. Yeah. I have never in the 8 years of doing this had just amazing parents and the kid just turns out bad. Like, that has happened 0 times. Every time I see, wow, this kid's amazing. Why are they so good? I always end up meeting a parent or an uncle or somebody at home who is just doing an outstanding job forging a relationship. And from what I've heard about the relationships with this shooter is that he didn't really have a whole lot of them. Okay, and that makes a lot of sense. So it's, how do we catch these things early, which is why I teach little kids too, is like, how do we best support these kids and make them understand the impact of their actions, that we're in a community, that everything's going to be okay, give access to mental health. How do we show these kids that we care about them and just really create loving communal relationships, right? And the problem is, we're not doing a very good job about it. Man, look at our politics, right? Is everyone's against each other, and with some understanding, but if we're going to fix this, it's not a gun issue. There's things we can do. There's restrictions we can add, but it's I put a Reuters article, depression, suicidal thoughts prevalent in high school students during pandemic, U.S. study. More than a third of high school students surveyed in the United States experienced stress, anxiety, or depression, and nearly a fifth said they seriously considered suicide during the COVID-19 pandemic. The first nationwide study of its kind found that 44% of students reported feeling sad or hopeless every day for 2 consecutive weeks or more during the prior year, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention study. Los, I think it was you that was talking about that, or it was one of the articles that talked about how do we do this, and it was like, well, we can't let kids 18 to 21 get their hands on guns. Well, geez, why would that be a problem? How come all these young people are shooting schools? It's like, well, those are the kids who are depressed because they're not making any money. They have problems at home with the kid. They have a tough home life, right? Because being a kid is tough. It's really hard. And I know we love to sit there and glorify it too much. Oh, it's such a wonderful time to be a kid. No, being a kid kind of sucks because you don't get to do anything you want to do. You have to listen to somebody else, and it drives people crazy. So when is it going to stop?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't just ignore this. And we've said it before on this show. We need to just rip off that label, mental health. This is health, right? And the whole issue and I think it goes back to the whole pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right? If you're struggling.
Oh, yeah.
If you find yourself at a low point. And on our unaired episode,
just say no,
which we did on a topic we'll cover in a future episode. But I said, hey, you do have a responsibility when you're going through something to not let it affect others, especially third parties. But there is some assistance that's needed, right? There's some aid. And we must be clear as it relates to the shooter in this incident here. He was never diagnosed with anything, right? Mental illness. So and hey, when we see the signs, we could do some self-diagnosing there. We know at the very minimum, things were not right. Things were not well. But it's not as if there was a diagnosis. And to the point of Beto O'Rourke, Bertram, as he just said here as well, the access wasn't readily available, which may have prevented such a diagnosis from occurring. And that really replicates itself all over the country, because mental health is seen as supplementary. It's seen as an add-on, right? It's an option. It's something that is almost a luxury, because if you think of someone who has a therapist, maybe they have money, maybe they have time to be able to seek the care that they need. But this is happening. It's affecting everyone, kids, especially with brains that have not finished developing, right? You don't reach that maturity point till you're 24, 25 years old.
Or because of trauma, develop wrong, Los.
Exactly. And so that should be addressed as frequently as your annual physical, at the very least. And we need to start doing this stuff to our brain, right? We need to start treating it very well, treating it delicately, because if not, things like this can and will happen. You're always in this world where, right, as you said, Bertram, everything has to be done by permission, right? You can't do this without, parents or guardians saying so. You can't do that. And so when traumatic things happen to you, oftentimes, right, you keep it inside, you keep it suppressed, because if you tell, maybe you'll get in trouble there. And it just starts working there, like, okay, I'm a kid, the adults know better, and even though this doesn't feel right,
that's not true at all, right?
I'm just gonna let this pass. It's no one's business. And even if I say something, there's my friends, and what are they gonna think of me? And there's all this stuff, right? And so we need to get to a point where we're addressing this wholeheartedly. And even among, and I'll pull up the data here, but even among white males, especially middle-aged white males, if that's what you're concerned with, right? If that's your cause there, this is something that's affecting them. The suicide rate with white males is going through the roof, especially middle-aged and older, going into senior. So this is hitting all spectrums. These are hitting all different groups, and we cannot ignore the brain any longer, because it controls so much. And if it goes sort of untreated, then we get tragedies over and over again. And you know what else is another mental affliction that we're dealing with? The numbness, Bertram. The numbness.
Ooh.
The fact that we're getting so used to this, right? And hey, I chose to cover this topic instead of some of the other ones we had on our docket, but there were so many that had occurred. We could have done something on those, but we're numb to it, right? And it's not that we're psychotic towards it. It's not as if we just, shrug or whatever, but there's only so many reactions we can have anymore. And that's because we're not even treating that right. We've gone beyond the point where we actually deal with this trauma that is hearing or reading about these shootings, these incidents that just happen at an alarming rate way too frequently. They shouldn't even happen at all. And it's just another shooting, another day.
Most people ask me at school, like, how do you work every day knowing that if a shooter comes up, you're going to die? It's like, I don't feel anything. Well, how could you not feel anything? Well, because I'm numb to it. Like, yes, I'm tired and I'm exhausted, and there's a lot of teachers leaving the profession, but you can't sit there and dwell on it the whole time. You're just kind of numb to and the kids are numb too. They do so many active shooter drills. They're just kind of numb to it.
Yeah. And so that's the fact that we've gotten so used to it is another sign of us not dealing with our mental health. And I'm not saying that, oh, we should be fawning over and, just stopping living our lives anymore. But there's something to be said about, how we deal with this. And I think it's a microcosm to this entire issue that is mental health. And then, guns as an instrument, if that's what you call them.
Los, one of the things that kind of stuck with me was that you were talking about how this kid had undiagnosed issues, or like there was no diagnosis. Not that he had something and it was undiagnosed, was that, well, he doesn't have any mental illness, there was no diagnosis. And to me, that's bullshit. I will say I've seen many times where it's like the school knows that there's a problem and won't do anything about it. Parents know that there's a problem and they won't do anything about it. And it can be very frustrating when you're like, hey, I noticed that this kid has some tendencies that could become very dangerous later on in life. And they say, well, just give them, extrinsic rewards. Like, oh, if they get their work done, or they if they have a good day, give them a piece of candy. And it's like, no, you're not listening to me. There's a problem here and we need to address it. Like putting a Band-Aid on it by giving them a piece of candy is only going to tide them over for a day. It's like these problems need to be addressed, and right now we're not addressing them, Los. And the left and the right, while they're all screaming at each other and turning this into a political thing and getting upset about it, I don't need that. I need you guys to be calm and address these issues and address the root of the issues. But I do agree that it goes back to the mental health thing. It's like, how do we solve both abortion and gun control? Well, we have to start by empathizing. We have to start with design thinking and saying, okay, this isn't the real problem. What's the problem behind it? Like, why are people doing this? And then once you start to understand that and you go, how can I help them? Well, then you can actually start to find change. But until you're willing to do that, this is not going to get fixed, and this is going to keep happening. So if anyone with any power is listening to this podcast, look up design thinking, empathize with the problem that you have, and let's see how we can find some solutions for it.
Exactly. Well, because, stage 2 is what? Define, right?
Define the criterion constraints.
Exactly.
And then ideate.
And then you start to think about it, ideate, and then you prototype.
Yeah, come on, baby. Man, you
know
you
test them out
very well. You're a brilliant man, Los.
I love prototyping, right? I always try things, but
my favorite part is empathizing. Because it makes you a better human being to just understand. Instead of getting mad at somebody, you go, well, hold on, how can I look at it from your point of view? You can't really see the problem until you do that, right? And what's funny about like abortion and gun controls, I was like, we're seeing the similar problems that both have a similar solution, but no one is willing to look on the other side politically.
Exactly. And because no one's asking, how could I understand, right? Your issue that you're going with, like, tell me more about this from your side. We always care about the what's happening, but not the why. Ooh. And it's time to get to the why, or else, who knows what's going to happen.
People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. That's what Simon Sinek says.
Mm-hmm.
People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Amen. So, yeah, this is really sad. It goes beyond thoughts and prayers. It's just heart hurts for those who are affected, impacted by this, in a way we all are, but especially those families. But yeah, Bertram, any final words, any final thoughts, takeaways from our conversation here?
No. I don't want to say anything fake. You know what I mean? Where it's like, my heart goes out to people. Hey, I understand. This is a horrible situation. It's just, I think we're all getting numb to it, and we need to solve this problem. We needed to solve it years ago. We need to solve it before Sandy Hook, right? And now it just keeps happening. And Los, I think it's going to happen again.
Absolutely. And that's the sad part. So that's Bertram. I'm Los. This is Mad World. Bye-bye.